Hello and welcome to Hints and Tips for Writing the Motivation Paper, which is an assignment in P312, and the Literature Review Paper, which is an assignment in P313. And I hope that this helps. You still need to visit the IUS Writing Center for APA format or the Purdue OWL Center. That's online writing lab. Both are good sources for APA material and APA format. So as we look at this first hints and points to remember, I've circled 12-point font, Times New Roman. That's important. It's an academic font. The actual feet in Times New Roman helps the eye track from left to right. So it's used in academic papers. It needs to be used in these two papers for you. The second point here is that all pages must have a running header and a page number. And the page number does not have a P or a P plus or a PG. It's just the number. And again, look at the format pages on those two websites, or you can in Word do a search for APA format, and Word will set that up automatically. The header and the running head and the page number appear first on the title page, and the title page is page number 1. Here's hints and points to remember number 2. Be sure that you have citations to your literature in your paper and in the reference page. I've drawn a red line here. That needs to be a one-to-one correspondence. Any source that's cited in the text of your paper needs to appear in the reference page. Any inclusion in the reference page must appear in the text of your paper. It's a reference page, not a bibliography. So only those that you've cited in the text appear in the reference page. They all appear there, but no extra ones. Okay, and again, you can check the IUS Writing Help Center for APA format for in-text citations. But briefly, if you see at the bottom, the APA style requires authors to use the past tense or present perfect tense when using signal phrases to describe earlier research. For example, Jones, 1998, found, or Jones, 1998, has found. Present tense verbs are not used in APA to signal that this research or this source has been found. Obviously, Jones was in 1998. It's not present tense. Do not use present tense verbs in your literature review. Hints and points to remember number 3, APA citations in text is what we're talking about here. When using APA format, follow the author date method of in-text citations. This means that the author's last name and the year of publication for the source should appear in the text. As an example again, parentheses, Jones, comma, 1998, close parentheses. And a complete reference should appear in the reference list at the end of the paper. That's pretty much what we said in number 2, but it's worth repeating. Let's look at the next slide, number 4. Write as if the reader is ignorant of your content. Ignorant means not informed. It certainly doesn't mean stupid. It means not informed. So your job is to inform the reader, to dispel any ignorance, uninformed opinions or thoughts that the reader has. You're informing them, you're dispelling their ignorance. And then the bullet points here are: have another person read your writing and offer suggestions for improvement. I would never submit a paper without having someone that I trusted read it and look for typos and mistakes in verb tense or anything like that. Basic sentences are better. You don't need 150-word sentences to make your point in APA. All introductory phrases at the beginning of the sentence need a comma. If you have a phrase that said, in the spring of 1994, comma, and then on with your sentence, or during the assessment gathering phase of the project, comma, and then go on with the rest of your sentence. So a comma after the introductory phrase at the beginning of sentences. And then I've underlined a double, and it'll be on the next slide. Do not use pronouns in the literature review portion of your paper. No pronouns. Pronouns are a lazy person's writing tool. Never use pronouns as the subject or at the subject of a sentence. Never use these in literature reviews or in APA writing. They, them, we, us, him, her, those, you. Don't use them. Who are you really talking about? Use the word that is the word for whom or who you're really talking about. Next point, never write your personal opinion about your research topic. It's not about your opinion, it's about what you found in the literature. On these assignments, you can use the word I when you're writing the introduction to your review paper and at the conclusion. So you're explaining why you chose this and you're explaining what you found in the conclusion. That will be okay. But in the literature portion where you're reviewing the sources or explaining the sources and synthesizing the sources, do not use the word I. And in fact, avoid using the word I whenever possible. All right, so the next one here, first names. That's right at the bottom of the board there. No first names in APA. No first names. One thing they do, some of them will denote gender. And we want gender equality, so we're not using first names because they may signal a gender of the researcher, and that doesn't matter in APA. So no use of first names. Last names only. No first names. Okay, so now on the reference page, make sure you include a reference page. It's its own standalone page. If you've typed halfway down the page in your last part of your text, don't start the reference page there. Do a Control-Enter on your keyboard. Control-Enter is a page break. It'll jump down to the next blank page, and that's where you start your reference page. It is the last page of your paper. You list all the sources that are in your text in correct APA format. You double space this page just like the body of your paper and put all the sources in alphabetical order. And again, both the websites that I've suggested will have that information for you. So I've circled those. It's the last page of your paper, APA format. Make sure they're in alphabetical order. Okay, here's a sample of a little writing, and I'll wait just a second for you to take a look there, especially when it starts before we can go into detail. Okay, here's the corrections. And when I mark your paper or assess your paper, if it's highlighted in yellow, it was good information, presented well, understandable, helping inform the ignorant. If it's underlined in green, it's excellent, and if there's no mark, then there's something we need to talk about, or it's just okay, or it needs correcting. So in this sample that was on the last slide, you look at that paragraph before we can go into detail. Too many we's. All those red marks are we's. Before we can go into detail about how to motivate students, we must first explain. Don't use we's. Don't use you. You know, you're not writing about we or you. You're writing about your subject. It says before we go into detail about how to motivate students. So you're really writing about motivating students. You're not writing about we. Down in the next sentences, motivation does not only occur in the classroom, but in every aspect of our life. You don't need our. It's just life. Aspect of life. We do not normally do things we do not like to do. We do the things that we feel. We. I thought I was going to pass out when I read this sentence. That's unacceptable. And the arrow down here, and I've typed in, subject of this sentence should be teachers, not we. Get rid of the pronouns. Next page. Here we're looking at one that I have corrected. We had his or her, the use of his or her. Look at the first sentence. It says, frustrating, or at the top of this starts in the middle of the sentence, but frustrating and hard to grasp, to fully grasp. And then it goes on. Here we go. A teacher has to be willing to positively motivate his or her students, even when his or her efforts seem in vain. So the teacher must ask herself or himself, that's unneeded. That's superfluous. That's extra words that shouldn't be there. You don't have to replace them with anything. You just take them out. If you read this sentence, a teacher has to be willing to positively motivate students, even when efforts seem in vain. So a teacher must ask, what is motivation? What? And go, stop right there. Just take them out. They're unneeded. They're extra words. Don't use it. I have a start new paragraph here because this paragraph went up into the previous page far too far. And remember, most paragraphs APA that you're writing will be 3 to 5 sentences, one main idea per paragraph, 2 or 3 supporting sentences. If you're writing a page of text and you haven't divided that into 2 or 3 or 4 paragraphs, you've made an error somewhere, because all that can't be supporting one main idea. This writer does have some green there, which is excellent, and the yellow, which is good. Look at the very bottom. I made a correction here. It says motivating even the most jaded students. You don't want to use inflammatory words. That would be better served to replace jaded with unmotivated. Okay, let's take a look at what's next. A blank slide, so let's go on. All right, so here's a motivation paper. Take a look at that one. Read it to yourself for a minute. Okay, so here's what I marked. First thing is, this can be especially difficult. That's a pronoun that is being made into the subject of the sentence. That's not what the sentence is about. The sentence is about motivation. Motivation can be especially difficult. All right, not this. Get rid of those pronouns. Second sentence in the paper is an introductory phrase that needs a comma. Down to the third arrow, it says this can be particularly difficult. Again, the same error as before. Do not use this as a subject of a sentence. And another one, his or her classroom, get rid of that. Okay? Now we're going on to the next. It says literature review. The lit review is not about studies. Look at this second sentence. These two studies can show the social effects in various ways. Your lit review is not about studies. It's about sources and information that answer your question. I don't expect to read the word studies in your lit review. That sentence is really about social effects. That should be the subject of the sentence. In green, I've typed the social effects of blank can be shown in more than one way. That's what that sentence is really talking about. Make the subject of the sentence have meaning. Okay, next slide. This one very simply just didn't put it in Times New Roman. They used Arial. That's unacceptable for APA writing. But they do have a level 1 heading. A level 1 heading is in bold and it's in the center of the page. If it had been in Times New Roman, it would have been great. Times New Roman, 12 point. This next page says motivation paper, and those are the directions for the assignment that are listed in the syllabus for P312. Your motivation paper has 3 main parts: the introduction, the motivation, and conclusion. And in the motivation section, be sure to explain what it is, explain what it means to students, adolescents, and then state how you will create student motivation. And the lit review assignment as a 4 to 6 page paper that reviews an issue in child adolescent development and all those things that are there in the syllabus for you to take note of and do that we've already talked about. And I think we're ready to hit the next, and this is in your syllabus. Here's the last slide. So for future teachers, one of the things I'm looking at is, can you complete a complex and detailed project? And those projects will be required by your school administrator. There's a lot of detail in APA. Let's see if you can handle that detail, find it out, use it in the right way to demonstrate I'm competent in completing complex and detailed assignments. The motivation paper and literature review paper are your opportunity to prove that you can. This is Dr. David Losey, IU Southeast, and that concludes this program on assignments of the motivation paper and the literature review. See you later.